25th day. Smurfed up, did it? 25th day. Try that again. Of February 2024. I'm going to be a host today. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as thenuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589, and I'll leave the number on the screen for a moment. All lines are currently opened. We got a great poll for everybody tonight. Should the United States of America have a congressional hearing into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's ruthless cover-up of the Fukushima nuclear meltdown? And the only way we can describe that is ruthless. What they done is, that was ruthless. And we covered some of that last week, and we're going to cover more of the Freedom Information Act releases, and these are from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And it's just this unbelievable contempt. And so, there, you know, when anybody's been following this in, say, for the last week is quite aware of this insanity that we're talking about, where you had multiple reactors melt down and they actually covered it up. Instead of being regulators, they were monsters. Instead of being stewards, they were sadistic demons. It's unbelievable. The whole story is unbelievable. We got some videos for the end of the show. We picked up more equipment the weekend. I'll show you that stuff. Fantastic stuff, actually. For the trailer. And we got the crane on the trailer, too, today. United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So what you're going to be watching tonight is Freedom of Information files that were released. And there was around 4.4 million emails. A lot of it's redacted, but a lot of it you can certainly read between the line, and a lot of it's not. This is the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission's, in the first month, this is their official estimate of the releases. So iodine 131 at 13,500,000 curies. But there's actually 124,000 curies of iodine 131 in a gram, which means there's 108 grams. It's less than 4 ounces is what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is asserting got out of the buildings that had several million pounds in each building. It's very concerning. It's very frightening that they worked as a team to rob you of your future and rob the species of life and rob humanity of a future so they can protect their jobs. And when they're supposed to be protecting us from the same kind of ruthlessness. And I can't comprehend why, even if this is 100 years down the road, that they shouldn't be dug up and prosecuted for what they've done. Japan's minister charged utility president TEPCO over a radioactive water leak. We'll cover a couple of these stories very quick, because this story is going strong. This is a week now, and this is dominating the news cycle every day for Fukushima, for instance, and it's a lot of nuclear. So I wonder what they're up to, because the cover story is well underway. And we'll just do a little bit of this, and then we'll jump into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's FOIA releases. Radiation Fukushima groundwater skyrockets 3,500 times over the weekend. Nothing being done to stop it flowing into the Pacific Ocean. But here they are claiming there's nothing getting out. And here you are in 2013 acknowledging massive amount is flowing into it. Not leaking, but flowing. This was a couple of days ago. Fukushima plant operator warned over contaminated water release. This story hasn't gone away. It has a physician's interesting fact for the West Coast in the new United Nations report. We're talking about the United Nations that is the same ones now denying that it happened. The 95% of the Fukushima discharge is transported in the Pacific, and the contamination to impact North America with uncertain consequences for the public health. Concern over recent releases, they changed in characters. Well, no, these are incredible nuclear meltdowns. I'm going to put it on the bigger screen just to make sure people in tablatures and phones can actually be able to see what we're talking about. Even a single mistake could result in the loss of trust from the local community and society. Even a single mistake. Well, what they're talking about is the lie, right? If the lie gets out, they lose all trust. Fukushima ozone plume hit Canada 6 months ago, 2013, and preceded the model predictions by several years. And human health is the first reason listed for the study. This was Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So you know they're going to cut your throat. 3 xenon releases, and you're talking about 18 zeros, between March the 12th and March the 16th, 2011. These plumes, the top one up in the top corner is 20 days of radioactive fallout. And yet they're claiming nothing got out. The one that comes half a year after the government TEPCO started to release was August the 24th, they claim was the first releases into the Pacific Ocean. 2013, the Japan Times, the actual mouthpiece of the Japanese government, discharges of Fukushima contamination have effectively contaminated into the Pacific, have effectively contaminated the ocean. Hi, everybody. Is that audio? I just turned it up another little notch. Is that going to be enough for everybody? I'll try to keep my eye in the comments section for a minute. Melted reactor cores will burn again if water is not perpetually poured in. Now, TEPCO hasn't stopped dumping it into the ocean from day one. They can't put it in tanks. It's too radioactive. The tanks were built so you wouldn't look for evidence. Because when they show you the tanks, and they talk about the tanks, they don't show you the reactors as they actually look, right? Excuse me, I'm getting there. Another week and I never stopped. I don't feel that I should stop, right? That's the Ghost Reactor 3, the Ghost Reactor 4. The NRC is saying that never happened. United Nations is now saying that never happened. The media is saying that never happened. That's what these stories that we're almost through are talking about. The operator said on February 7, 5.5 tons, estimated to contain 22 billion. So February 7th, so this has been going on for 18 days. This story has dominated the media for 18 days. That's insane. So I wanted to address it with some more documentation later. Estimated to contain 22 billion becquerels. There's 37 billion in a curie, and iodine got 124,000 curies in a gram. So you got 124,000 times 37 billion to get the physical atoms, anthropogenic man-made atoms. So this stuff is catastrophic. Had leaked from a building for treating contaminated water earlier that day. And cesium-37, of course, is nothing compared to all the other, like curium isotopes, by the way, is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. Not cesium or iodines. And curium never goes away. And you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Had leaked from a building for treating contaminated water earlier that day. Let's go backwards to 2013, August. Twice as much contaminated water entering the ocean from Fukushima as officials claimed. Japan government, 600 tons of groundwater entered the ocean every day. And TEPCO figures assume all water entering the ocean from the plant is contaminated. Gee, I don't know. You think all the water they're spraying over that is contaminated beyond reproach? If you try to filter it, you can never get back in the room or the building where the filter is to. after about 20 minutes. It raises the questions over TEPCO's ability to safely decommission the quake. Notice they put that they always do that. Quake-wrecked plant. No, it was a nuclear detonations. This was a model from China. And this is cesium model. And this model, I'm going to flash through it. And we're up to 2022, 23, 2024, right there. But what you're ignoring is that the whole planet was covered in 20 days. We're almost through. There's 4 more clicks, I think. Please stop pouring the wrong radioactive water into the sea. So I got no idea what that was all about. The ABC story disappeared. So this is the original FOIA, Nuclear Regulatory Commission's estimate of radioactive fallout. Here's the 6-year model from the Germany Institute of the emissions directly into the ocean.
This
So, like, first off, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency is well aware of everything I've ever showed you. They're well aware of it. They decide to hit your guts. They decided that they wouldn't have a job if the truth come out, I guess. So that's the dispersal based on 6 years, I think, of cesium-137. And you can't just use models of cesium-137 because that's outrageous misrepresentation. And so 80 years of radioactive plumes, because, like, see, this is a 19.5 days, 468 hours, 468 hours of radioactive fallout based on venting, not based on the actual loss of the inventories from the destroyed buildings that had millions of pounds in them. It had decades of reactor cores. And so 80 years of these emissions, and think of the radiation as a snowstorm. So you see up in the top corner, 36 hours of the snowstorm, 180 hours of the snowstorm, 324 hours of the snowstorm, 468 hours, 19.5 days of the snowstorm. Now this snowstorm is, think of a snowstorm, but each snowflake instead is an atom, and each atom is pulsing energy at the speed of light. And then think of the gamma, which is cesium, by the way, and other gammas. They'll pulse energy several hundred meters. They'll pulse right through your house and your neighbor's house. They're terrible threat to all the species. So March the 15th, Japanese officials pulling all workers from the damaged nuclear plant. Instead of calling it from the plant with multiple nuclear meltdowns, instead of giving it the respect it deserves, they disrespect all life and their own and their children's and their friends and their families. Japanese officials pulled all workers from the damaged. Well, on the 15th, this is what reactor. This is not damage. This is a catastrophic event that ejected the fuel rods from the reactor cores and the fuel pools. We've never seen nothing like this in history. We've never even heard tell of something like that. I got a picture of the explosion. Let me bring that up. So to your right is Reactor 3 detonation, because it was a plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. It cooks off about 200,000 degrees hotter than the other nuclear meltdown. And so Reactor 1 is over there, which was just a typical reactor fuel, which is terrifying. But number 3 should never exist at the plutonium. They were doing it because they don't want to store it for a million years and because of nuclear weapons and everything else. And putting it back in the reactor is probably the most insane thing you can do, because when you take it out and put it in a fuel pool, the emissions from the fuel pool, which are perpetual, these are perpetual machines forever, are producing plumes all day long that covers the entire planet every day. March the 15th, the skeleton crew remaining at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant is being evacuated. So let's go back to this one first. The skeleton crew was being evacuated. Well, here was the problem at the plant. You can have 1,000 people there, but they can't do anything. There's a couple of reasons. One is they had a tsunami run through it, and so there's no infrastructure left for 1,200 miles, let alone the plant. Second off, they had multiple nuclear meltdowns and detonations, which the whole site is contaminated with lethal doses. So you can't do nothing there. Plus, you had a tsunami run through it, right? All the infrastructure is gone. There's no switches going to be working anywhere on that site. But the NRC claimed everything was working. It's unbelievable. March the 21st, answers to congressional staff questions. So that's why I say tonight that there should be a congressional hearing, and they should bring me in to tell the story and then cross-examine the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, because we can whoop them big time. The evidence is unassailable, see? Monday, March the 21st, answers to the congressional questions. What was the basis for concluding the core debris in Unit 4 spent fuel pool would not abate, would not go through the cement floor? Well, Reactor 4 was gone. It was gone immediately. I might have to bear with me. It's one of those nights where you don't want to. Well, here's the first picture of Reactor 4. This was 2013 when they stripped down the exterior. There is nothing left. And there's zero possibility the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't know the building, reactor fuel, and the pool was gone on the 16th. There's zero possibility. I'm going to play a clip of the American media, which worked hand in hand with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to destroy everybody's future. It's a very short video, but the media are claiming they're in that fuel pool that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is alluding to, and that Congress is asking questions on.
Where I was standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So there should be a congressional hearing on the media doing that, right? The whole planet should be going after these people for doing that. And this is only a fraction of them that done it. Pretending they're in a building in 2013 that doesn't exist. They're not doing it because it's harmless or innocuous or benign, okay? They're doing it because there's catastrophic repercussions from these meltdowns. And so when you ask what is the half-life of xenon-133, that's not the question that Congress should be asking. It's the half-life of curium, 241, 242, 243, 244. What is the half-life of xenon-133? Well, it's enough to cover America, and it's such an intense emitter and it travels with all the other radioactive isotopes. The thing is, you can find the xenon-133, but you can't find the plutonium and the americium, the neptuniums, the strontiums, which are typical Geiger counter. Workers are evacuated Unit 3 due to high radiation. Is this true? Well, the numbers were... Unit 3 was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And so they weren't evacuated. They ran like insane. Everybody ran. A puff of smoke or steam was released from Unit 3. It's quite frightening when you see that stuff. A puff of smoke was released from Unit 3. Does that look like a puff of smoke to anybody? It's surreal, isn't it? It's unbelievable. It's actually unimaginable that there was the smoke or steam from Unit 3. There's no smoke or steam. This is a nuclear meltdown, for goodness sakes. The NRC, we believe the smoke or steam seen at Unit 2 was released when TEPCO cut a hole in Unit 2 reactor building. Like you had Reactor 1 on one side, Reactor 3 on the other side detonate. There's fuel rods and fuel assemblies and reactor cores all over that place. Nobody's cutting holes in buildings. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, of all people, knew this. They know everything I'm telling you and everything I'm showing you. And what they done to you is unbelievable betrayal. How can you sit in silence and let them get away with this? How can the world sit in silence? Is something I can't comprehend. Like they're on the other side of the pump house on the seaside because you can't go near the reactors. So how are you going to cut a hole in Reactor 2? Reactor 2, by the way, detonated and burnt constantly from the fuel pools and the reactor cores. They had no water, right? They need 4,500 tons a minute. You don't give them that, they start melting down right away. It happens really quick, like 50 minutes. NRC monitors notice of unusual event at Diablo Canyon power plant's tsunami issue in Nuclear Regulatory Commission's news. And this was March 11th. Monitors notice of unusual event at Diablo Canyon because of tsunami issues. So another one from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they were asked, why is Ki, which is potassium, natural, harmless, stupid, everyday, potassium that everybody's acclimated to through genetic superior selection, to the 10-mile exclusion zone around Fukushima? Population closest within 10 miles of the power plant are at greatest risk of exposures to radiation and radioactive material. Well, everybody on the entire planet is. But yeah, anybody close is obviously. The purpose of radiological emergency preparedness is to protect people from the effects of the radiation. Well, don't go to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for that. Their job is to cut your throat, and they're really good at it in 1,000 different ways, I noticed. Exposures after an accident at a nuclear power plant. Evacuation is the most effective protection measure in the event of a radiological emergency because it protects the whole body, including the thyroid and other organs, from all radionuclides and all exposure pathways. However, in situations where evacuation is not feasible, in-place sheltering is substituted as an effective protective action. You got to stop breathing air. There's the only way you can protect yourself. And you can't stop it from ingressing into your house because there's so much of it. You got to breathe air, right? You have all kinds of vents. Sheltering in your house is not an option. If you live within 100 miles of it, you should abandon your home, literally. You should move somewhere else. You don't want to be within 100 miles. These are always hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. They're always not leaking. See, they even got me saying it sometimes. The fuel pools are splitting atoms into the environment, the same amount of atoms they would to boil water for millions of homes because there's multiple reactor cores in the fuel pools. In addition, administering potassium iodine is reasonable, prudent, inexpensive supplement. They raised limits to 70 times normal for children in Japan before they can get the potassium iodine. And then they refused to use the speedy system, which had complicated completed 5,500 models of the radioactive fallout. They released it to the American military in Japan, but didn't release it to the population that paid for it. And inexpensive supplements to both evacuation and sheltering of the population. Of course, thyroid is, you got to get it 24, 48 hours before it melts down. And you're still going to breathe it in. It's still going to saturate in your body. It's still going to sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, and everywhere else in between. But see, when it gets in your thyroid turns it now into radioactive hormones for the rest of your life. And your thyroid regulates everything in your body. And so you want to protect that. But the potassium can't do it, because that only works for iodine, but there's many, many other gammas will gravitate towards your thyroid. So if you've got massive amounts of iodine, you're going to have massive amounts of other gamma emitters. And so when you told people to shelter in place, and then let's look in hindsight, because we can do that. We have that luxury now, where they went in and picked up 30 million one-ton bags. So sheltering in place was the worst case scenario. Because look how much, they got 105,000 sites in 2019 throughout the prefecture of millions of one-ton bags of radiation that they scratched up from the surface, which is only 3%. It didn't touch the forest, the mountains, the hills. They only done farms, which, why would you clean up, try to pick up radiation on a farm that's permanently irradiated? Well, because you can grow food there, Dana, but yeah, it's permanently irradiated. Yeah, but they don't care. They're not going to tell you the truth. In fact, their job is to kill you, as far as I can tell. And try proving the difference. Why is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission only providing 2 Ki tablets per person? The tablets are to be used if necessary to supplement evacuation or sheltering. But you can't, it doesn't work. It's a fable, right? After individuals evacuated the area, they will no longer be exposed to significant quantities of radioiodines. The Ki potassium tablets, if taken at the appropriate doses and time, block the thyroid gland, preventing uptake of radioactive iodine. Any radioactive iodine taken to the body after consumption will be rapidly removed from the body. That's not true. That's unequivocally not true. That's absurd to even suggest it. Because it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones too. It doesn't rapidly be removed from your body if you take Ki iodine. It's unbelievable they would say something like that. But it's not if they're monsters, if they're absolutely real demons. The 2 tablets will protect the thyroid glands for approximately 48 hours. You can't protect the thyroid gland from gamma because it's going to radiate from everywhere else. March the 21st. Nuclear Regulatory Commission continues to work in coordination with other federal agencies to deliver temporary cooling equipment to the Diachi site. And it's very perplexing stuff, by the way. And the date was March the 24th, when all the reactors had already detonated. And the thing with this story is you can't really rush anything. As soon as you start rushing, you realize you better slow down. So March the 21st, the country still looked like that. And you couldn't rush anything in there anymore because the reactor's detonated. So there's nothing you can do. The buildings didn't exist anymore. March 25th, 2011. This was the chain of command, allegedly, in order to guard against the story coming out, right? It's March 25th, 2011. The Pacific Command is charged with evacuating all U.S. personnel from Japan in the highly unlikely scenario that the events at Fukushima degrade to that extent. Well, they had degraded right away, right? 1,200 miles of the coastline ripped apart and put through a wood chipper. You had tsunamis running to the nuclear power plant. And like the original footage, which they had access to, like every nuclear regulatory committee member, when they seen that picture of reactor 3 and 4, they knew the fuel pools were gone, they knew the reactor cores were gone. And they choose to cut your throat and continue even today to cut your throat. And even today they continue to pretend that they're actually humans. They have some of the attributes of an actual human when they don't. These are the anybody that would cover this up is the furthest thing from a human you'll ever come across. They're the most despicable, disgusting, revolting, parasitic monsters. It's what they've done to us and the 8 million species can never be forgiven. How can you forgive that? March 25th, they're looking for a link with the NRC that would provide them with the radiological situation awareness, protective actions, recommendations that will keep them informed. Well, the last ones you're going to go to is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They're the very last ones, unfortunately. Terrifyingly, horrifyingly. They're the very last ones. They're the worst humans imaginable. History will clearly show these are the worst humans to ever exist. See, they used the xenon because it has a short half-life. They used the iodine 131 because it has a short half-life. And so then it's only got a 3-day or 8-day half-life, right? And so the average person, that was a couple months ago, it's all gone, don't worry about it. Because most people are completely incompetent when it comes to actual understanding anything technical. They just refuse to acknowledge that there's something there they should look at. Thanks to the Hollywood and everything else, 3 xenon releases. So the top one is 20 days. And there was many different models. There was endless models provided. I'm going to bring up a couple right quick. We already showed that, right? I just think it's stunning how the NRC cut your throats and my throats and everybody else on this planet. And the senators and the Congress people's children and friends and families and loved ones, they destroyed their future. This is another model based on 26 days of radioactive fallout, for instance. The French model is really interesting. It's the most accurate one out there. This is the French government. The model is based upon 16 days of radioactive fallout, or 16 days after the tsunami, 9 days of radioactive fallout covering the entire planet. The NRC is not going to show that to the Congress, right? They're not going to show that to the Congress. March the 31st, Japanese nuclear incidents, technical aspects. Nuclear reactors, uranium or mixed oxide, uranium oxide, plutonium, or MOX. It's a plutonium MOX, actually. For fuel, uranium plutonium atoms fission or split, releasing neutrons causes additional fission in a chain reaction, and also releasing energy. Alpha particles are 2 protons and 2 neutrons, electrically charged and massive by subatomic standards, and travel relatively slowly, less than the speed of light. So they lose energy quickly in matter. And they travel only an inch in the air, but that's enough in your body to destroy your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells for the rest of your life. It never goes away. It never stops pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. And suggesting that they travel relatively slowly. Like, what are they talking about? Stopped by a sheet of paper or the dead outer layers of the skin. First off, they assimilate into your water, your food, your air. They end up in your laundry and your showers and your cooking utensils and your cleaning, your dishwashing, and your drinking it. It's assimilated in every facet of your life. And as you bioaccumulate it in your body has to attack every one of the atoms, and we're talking about a prodigious amount, every second for the rest of your life with white blood cells, which is causing an effect, right? For the rest of your life, you have less red blood cells, and the more you get in you, the more you drink, the more you eat, the more you breathe, the more unhealthy, the more compromised your immune system also becomes. I think these are the most despicable, most disgusting parasites in human history I've ever come across. What they done is beyond reproach. Beta particles, electrons or positrons, are electrically charged, so are readily absorbed by matter, but are much less massive than alpha particles or neutrons, depending on their energy. Some are stopped by outer layers of skin, others can penetrate several millimeters. And again, they're talking about external doses only. Again, despicable scum. Really, truly despicable scum. Neutrons are typically emitted by heavy atoms like uranium, plutonium, curium. They have no electrical charge and may be highly penetrating. Depending on their speed, they can travel tens of meters in the air. So if you're outdoors, they can travel through your walls, for instance, and damage you and your loved ones and your ecosystem. Gamma rays, though, are protons releasing during radioactive decay. Protons may be thought of as a packet of electromagnetic energy, and the radio waves, light, and X-rays are less energetic protons, well, compared to the worst one. Gamma ray energies vary widely, but they're still nasty, see? Gamma ray energies vary widely. Those of medium to high energies are highly penetrating and can travel hundreds of meters in the air. They can pulse for several hundred feet. This is why the helicopters are flying low over the ground with Geiger counters, because they can read that, see? It can travel hundreds of meters in the air. Stopping them requires a thick layer of dense material like lead. Yeah, like 2 feet or 5 feet of lead. How many houses are stuffed with lead in their walls? Anybody? So the radioactive fallout pulses energy right through your houses, through your neighbors' houses, and then radiates your neighbors in the other house, and everything in between. They're the worst case scenario. And the French's model is cesium-137. This model is based on 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And it's only based on 9 days, though. Once you up the ante, then you're also talking about full body X-rays for all the species and all humans. And so in the forest in particular, wipes out the bacteria and the fungus. So if you start seeing lots of floods, you can call that work of radioactive fallout, because you kill the ecosystem. It doesn't soak up water in the forest no more. So highly penetrating, can travel hundreds of meters in the air. So basically not even safe to go for a walk anymore. And the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, instead of coming up with solutions, stabbed everybody in the back. And these so-called useful gamma-emitting isotopes that they use in the hospitals are shocking. It's shocking what they're doing to humanity. This nuclear industry is somebody has to make a stand. Like, in positions of power, somebody needs to step up. We need a hero in Congress and Senate. And we need a hero right away. We need someone to start a congressional hearing into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's ruthless cover-up of the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. And calling this a ruthless cover-up still doesn't do it justice. It's hideous what they actually done to us. It's terrifying what they done to us. So say, for instance, in Tokyo was almost 1 million atoms per square meter. And a Becquerel is the pulse of energy each second from those atoms. So Tokyo area soil testing finds radioactivity at, this is cesium-137 you're talking about, at 1 million atoms per square meter with the children. So you should abandon Tokyo. Well, we got so much on that. We've said that so many times. But now you're talking about pulsing energies 300 feet or more. 300 to 600 feet of energy. That's why you call it global warming, see? Because it pulses energy so far, so much, and it radiates everything around it. It's a double-edged sword because it radiates everything with so much energy. So when it's in the forest, all the leaves start becoming radioactive eventually. And they start pulsing energy, and everything that they're on the ground that they touch gets little side effects of it. It's frightening how evil the nuclear regulatory actually is. So 1 becquerel equals 1 disintegration per second, which is the atom pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. And in case of gamma, it could be pulsing it up to 600 feet away or more. It's unbelievable that this industry is allowed to exist another second. Radioactive iodine-131 is intensely radioactive, and the damage is forever, by the way, and has specific activity of 124,000 curies per gram and a half-life of 8 days. But what it means is all the other isotopes are going to be there in similar quantities, because you can find the cesium or the iodine-131, but it's harder to find. Like for every iodine-131, there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. There's 10 half-lives. So when they're talking about a small amount of cesium, of iodine-131, they're only talking about 3.5 ounces or so, which is 13 million curies. And for cesium-134, they're talking about 300 pounds, is it? I can do the math here. And I think we know what cesium-137. I'll just bring it up here right quick. How about that? So 270 curies. So 270,270 curies. That's what they're saying got out of multiple reactors with decades of reactor cores melting down. Bear with me. I think I got the cesium. I think cesium is 120 curies per gram. I'll bring it up here. I got it. cesium-137. Well, bring it on home there. Should have used a capital C. Okay, I got it. Yes, no, cesium, strontium is 140 curies. Cesium is 88 curies. So let's divide 88 into that to get grams. Now let's divide that by 29 to get ounces. And divide that by 16 to get pounds. So 6.6 pounds. Well, that's a bit of a relief, isn't it? That's fantastic news. So, out of 4 reactors that are completely gone, with 8 fuel pools or so at the top of each building, all gone, and you're talking about millions and millions of pounds, only 6 pounds got out. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is literally the worst of the worst that humanity can offer us. They're the worst, the very, very worst scum of the earth by a long shot. They're despicable scum, aren't they? So disintegrations per gram would be 4 quadrillion per gram. 4.5 quadrillion, 15 zeros, right, per gram. So the whole story is just so heartbreaking. So there's 108 grams and divide it by 29 to get ounces. So 3.5 ounces, is it? Less than 3.5 ounces. And that's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is saying literally nothing got out. But see, these numbers look impressive, right? But when you do the math, what the truth is missing. Like suggesting that only a couple of grams got out of this, how is that not criminal? And how can you have a future and let them get away with that? How can you hope to have a future? By sitting in silence, by not choosing the moral high ground. It's unbelievable. So when control rods are inserted into the reactor core, individual atoms continue to fission, but the chain reaction stops. Control rods typically contain boron and cadmium because they are efficient neutron absorbers. It was added to the cooling water in Fukushima Daiichi incident to prevent inadvertent criticality. That was the 25th, I think? I can't remember. I don't see it there. I think this was around the 25th, the nuclear regulatory statement. So, like, this is day 5. That's what the Medusa, the plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. Like, the NRC doesn't need me. They just need to use pictures of the very first couple of weeks, and then everything makes sense, right? What the NRC done, that's uncalled for, man. So you had a bad accident. Deal with it. You couldn't shut down all the nuclear plants in America right away anyway because you're dependent upon them thanks to the scummery of the nuclear industry. But it would have led to change. We would have ended up coming up with solutions like geothermal and that. And we slowly would have started implementing that. Instead, they're trying to promote more nuclear. So the nuclear industry steals $1 trillion from the taxpayers and then just group themselves are looting the whole country, and they're denying the country a future. They're completely denying the country a way forward. And in order to cover up their crimes, they're allowing all kinds of other things to happen. Give you more headaches to think about than them, right? Like the invaders they're allowing to come into the country. Fission that proceeds at a desired rate releases energy over several years from one load of fuel. It's basically 2 to 3% of the reactor core gets used. But the reason that they take the fuel out of the reactor cores is because the reactor fuel becomes very brittle and has billions of trillions of microscopic cracks, which allows the radiation to pour out. So when you put it in the fuel pool, it's still splitting the same atoms and needs to boil water for 1 million homes. And there is no number out there that equates how many atoms we're creating. It's around Googleplex or something, Gogolplex or centrillions. And that still doesn't do it justice of how much atoms are being split to boil water for a single reactor. So how many atoms do you got to split to boil water for 1 million homes? And if I got 200,000 on the head of a needle, I can't even perceive it. I can't see it, or smell it, or taste it, or hear it. So, and it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So when you got 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. Anthropogenic man-made atoms. And it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison on top of that. That's a very, very nasty thing to happen to your planet, have these horrific releases. And then now the releases from the mixed oxide fuel reactor, the plutonium mixed oxide fuel number 3 reactor, are 2 billion times 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison because they're gone through a chain reaction a second time. And because nobody's ever holding the industry accountable, they just get eviler and eviler every single day in every single generation, every single administration, to the point now where they have none of our contempt for us and all the species. And they doomed us by this power mad, this power hungry, this This incredible, like, there's no words. I don't know. You got to kind of make up your own words to describe how friggin' evil, they're blinded by power, but that still doesn't do it justice of the damage that we're talking about, the incredible, horrific. Even with the fuel rods fully inserted to halt the nuclear chain reaction, radioactive decay of the fuel rods' primary fission products generates the heat, which must be dissipated. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, cooling was done by pumping cold water into the reactor. You're not pumping anything into that. And if you do, anything that's coming out of it is lethal by the liter on a whole different level. If the heat is not dissipated, rods become so hot they melt and burn, and the fire would loft particles of radioactive material into the air. Well, what do you think that is? So they're saying that never happened. That's the original footage, right? And it's the same thing for Reactor 4, for instance. There's zero possibility anybody in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission didn't know the reactor fuel pools and reactor cores were gone in Reactor 4. And there was zero possibility the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we're talking even the Sally Ann's at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would have looked at it and said, oh, the fuel pool and reactor cores are gone. If the fuel rods become too hot, the zirconium cladding may also react with water and produce hydrogen. Well, the hydrogen from the nuclear meltdown itself, it's radioactive hydrogen. It's totally different. And they can't use inert nitrogen gas to preclude the hydrogen ignition because you had a tsunami strip the coastline. And by the time they wrote this, it was very clear what had happened to them. They decided to hide it from everybody else. In order to cool the fuel rods, personnel have been spraying huge amounts of seawater into the reactors and spent fuel pools. There is no fuel pools. The original first pictures that showed up means, there's no fuel pools. Bear with me here. I transferred pictures to my fastest hard drive. There's no fuel pools in Reactor 3. And when you look at the detonation of Reactor 3, you can see why there's no fuel pools. There's no fuel pools left in Reactor 2. There's no fuel pools left in Reactor 4. And there's no fuel pools in Reactor 1. And the Nuclear Regulatory would have been the first to know that. The very first people to know this. Workers were using fresh water instead of seawater. Well, the seawater, the uranol peroxide, the uranium, what I call the uranium peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, which are these things, right? And so these are some of the shapes that the sulfur produces. They knew this in the 50s from nuclear wars / testing, because a nuclear weapon, even in testing, is still a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout. And when they done it in the ocean, they noticed this effect with all the ships over the Marshall Islands, where the ships were so radioactive from the plume. I actually got a little clip here I think tells that story. Let me find it. Let me see if I can find it, I should say. I can probably find that. Let me put in another word then. Oh, well, can't get them out. Oh, there we go. Yeah, this was Castle Bravo. This was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's because it's a plutonium bomb. I'm going to adjust the audio. But it talks about the range of, and so what they're alluding to is urinal peroxide buckyballs.
The whole picture of fallout contamination
I'll turn it up,
becomes
hang
of
on.
increasing importance with high-yield weapons.
I'll do it again.
The whole picture of fallout contamination becomes of increasing importance with high-yield weapons. In one program, drone ships were sent into fallout areas to evaluate the worth of a washdown system for ship decontamination. We found we could measure fallout even in large ocean areas by making aerial surveys using extremely sensitive radiation detection equipment and with surface craft such as tugs and destroyers. As a result of these measurements, we were able to document for the first time fallout data from high-yield detonations. It is now known that fallout from the larger Castle shots blanketed areas of more than 5,000 square miles with radioactive material that would have been lethal to unprotected personnel. This one result gives a new insight into a method for using high-yield weapons in both strategic and tactical situations.
In a 5,000-mile radius. Lethal doses. And that's due to the urinal peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And so when they talk about using fresh water instead of salt water, that wasn't on the 25th like this particular FOIA report, the Freedom of Information Act report. They didn't stop pumping salt water, and I think it was like 40 days or longer. Spent fuel rods are placed in pools of water to cool them, typically for years, until most of the short-lived radionuclides decay. Well, they don't decay per se. They're released constantly. There is no containment. That's what the tall, skinny stacks at the nuclear power plants are for, venting from the fuel pools. Because the fuel pools are still split in the same atoms that would boil a million homes. So if you got 8 fuel pools at the top of these buildings, which you probably did, because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, then you're talking about 8 million people worth of energy is in those fuel pools, and that amount of atoms. So enough atoms to boil water for 8 million homes all day long, all night long. And that's vented constantly. And that's why almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. I showed you some of that earlier. The industry is evil in every direction you look. Under every piece of carpet, under every cushion, you find evil with nuclear. They don't have a single redeeming quality at all. And then they murder you in your hospitals with absurd amounts of radiation and call it therapy. The arrogance to call murdering people in hospitals therapy. And we've covered the studies for just absurd. I know personally I have over 60,000 studies on radiation. And so when you hear them say not much is known about this or not much known about that, this is absurdness. The whole industry is just like your worst nightmare. And I got no idea how it can exist without an absurd amount of corruption. So they made sure that corruption... See, when you go back... If you go backwards to the inception of nuclear, the Manhattan Project and stuff like that, there was this enormous amount of secrecy. And we're talking about enormous. Every nuclear scientist was spied on, and every spy was spied on, and every one of those spies was spying on the scientists were spied on. And they never went away. And they don't really have, because they're the Secrecy Act, they steal money, and you don't even know they exist. They didn't go away, and so everything is a threat to their future, their cushy future, including you. You're a threat. Just being alive, you're a threat to them. That's how they see you. They see you as the enemy. They see birds as enemies and insects as the enemy, because that tells the tale of nuclear. They see themselves as invisible, right? Where no one knows they exist, no one acknowledges them, because the secrecy acts in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that stuff never went away. At any given time, there's tens of thousands of spies out there pretending that they deserve unlimited checkbook. Spent fuel pools have no hardened containment structure to protect against the radiation releases. So it's boiling. Each fuel pool boils off about 120,000 liters a day, and because the fuel rods have got billions and trillions of microscopic cracks, it releases a stupid amount into the water of radiation, including the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods is the curium isotopes. And the only reason we know that is because of the study on beagle dogs and beagle puppies. Let me just bring that up for 1 second. And this always bothers me. But such an important story. We've been telling this story for a very long time, right? So, toxicity of inhaled plutonium dioxide, anthropogenic man-made, which is plutonium is man-made anyway, right? It's named after the devil, by the way. And so this study of 144 beagle dogs with uranium or plutonium-238, a single inhalation, death from radiation occurred from 1.5 to 5.4 years after exposures. So they all had 3 different tumors from the plutonium, not one tumor or 2 tumors. They all had basically 3 tumors. Bone tumors found in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. Bone tumors. 93 dogs out of 144 had bone tumors. And for children, of course, you're mutating the stem cells also. It's a very insidious way to die. Lung tumors found in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death. And liver tumor were found in 20 dogs with the cause of death in only 2 dogs. So tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal or competing causes of death. And the findings in the dogs suggest that the similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to the same amount. But what they didn't tell you was that it was discovered that human kidneys are 50 times less efficient, less effective than an animal's kidneys at removing plutonium. So you're 50 times more susceptible to getting those 3 tumors and dying. But see, the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes, and curium isotopes is 20 times worse than the plutonium isotope. So when they talk about xenon-133 or krypton-85 or iodine-133 or 132 or 131s, because they have short half-lives, right, is to lead you away from the... Because everything that comes out of a chain reaction with a long half-life, like plutonium, for instance, curium, maintains their energy for 10 half-lives. So plutonium-239, say, for instance, is 24,000-year half-life, 240,000-year life. It maintains its energy for that entire time. And same thing with the uraniums. And what the industry had done for 80 years is tell you, stuff with a long half-life is harmless, is so weak it doesn't matter, and everything else. But the stuff that's coming from a chain reaction doesn't have that particular attribute. The stuff in nature does, and we're already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection, right? It's irrelevant, it's harmless, it's stupid. It's stardust. It's stuff that everything on the planet is made of. The trees are made of, everything is made of the stardust. But man-made isotopes, all the man-made cesium, iodine, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontiums, all the other ones, their daughters, the man-made anthropogenic ones, are not created by the sun. And so no species, including humans, has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Which means your body is going to attack each one of these as a foreign entity it doesn't recognize, and it's going to attack it with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And say you're young, well, in 40 years it'll have a sarcophagus built around it. You call that a tumor, right? And so then the fallout in North America of the xenon-133 was 1 million atoms per square meter. And iodine-131 was actual particles. Particles are unbelievably worse because you're talking about particles from the reactor. stuff that became ionized, right? Very, very nasty stuff. And the West Coast was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of the iodine-129. So this was sustained. And what that means, though, because it never goes away, is it saturates, you're talking about all these different isotopes. The two iodines, all the other ones would have been there, two of the 131 and 132 also in the original. They're very intensive stuff. And that started a cascade of all the species. Because you saturated the thyroid glands, because we're way up the food chain, right, compared to insects and fungus and bacteria and ants and birds and bees in particular, the pollinators. They're like, so 11 atoms per kilogram for a child is devastating. Eventually you're going to destroy their heart right away. But 50 atoms, or aka 50 becquerels a kilogram, 50 pulses of energy a minute, will cause permanent lesions to the adult organs. So that's going to be applicable to all the species our size, right? Their originally estimates were for the killer whales to be around 1,000 atoms per kilogram, which meant that they basically had leukemia. They're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. So the industry is so used to poisoning you, the nuclear industry would have been the first ones, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would have been the first one to know everything. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission allows these places to be surrounded by farms. So is there any big surprise that they're now viciously cutting everybody's throat? They're personally cutting people's throats because they're allowing us to get irradiated and contaminated and poisoned in so many facets. We have no chance of protecting ourselves. Because almost every nuclear power plant worldwide is surrounded by farms, and the only way they can do that is with the blessing of each administration, right? Because the administration elects the nuclear regulatory chair. Their job is to apologize or promote according to whatever the nuclear industry tells them, but that's their players, right? It's so corrupt that after 80 years of being just degenerate monsters, they'll do it to you just as an act of good faith for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. In other words, they'll lie to you to the point where you have no ability to defend yourself. And that's what they got done to you. So the right thing now is go after them and hold them accountable and then come up with solutions so that there might be a future generation. Because if we don't do that, there will not be a future generations. And then they're causing all kinds of other things because there's so many illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses from the radiation that they need other things, right, to blame it on. And we can't talk about it on YouTube, right? If you talk about it on YouTube, another strike on your account, right? You can't question quite a lot. On YouTube, it's illegal to question certain things on YouTube. They tell it to you too. They give you a strike and they tell it to you. So it's lobbying groups that are running this, right? The spent fuel pools can even be more dangerous than the active fuel rods. It's not that they can be. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. There is no containment. So the farms that are surrounding these places are perpetually in radioactive fallout, right? Because the fuel pools are splitting atoms long after the plant is closed into the ecosystem. And it doesn't just fall on the farms, but they take a brunt. And then you go to your supermarkets. It's unbelievable how evil this industry has become because there's no checks and balances. Obviously, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency is not a check and balance. The United Nations is not a regulatory agency. They don't have any sovereignty over any country. They have influence. And like Japan is the third biggest contributor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. You really think they're going to blow off $1 billion a year and rat out the rat? Of course not. According to Tokyo Electric Power Company, which is when they were bankrupt right away, they were nationalized with the Japanese government immediately because they had no hope of containing or paying for anything. So they're essentially the Japanese governments. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would have worked with the Japanese government And this way, see, if everything goes to shit, then you blame it on TEPCO, which doesn't exist. And TEPCO can go bankrupt, right? Be dissolved, and they can sell the assets to pay restitution, which was typical of a charter anyway. But the minute that you gave corporate personhood to a corporation, where you gave them certain human rights, nobody can go to jail, so there's no incentive not to be evil. And it's illegal under the current Constitution in the past. You know, like, it goes like this. So the slavery law was created to give slaves rights to free them from an oppressive government, right? It still took a long time for that to happen. They found other ways to frig over the black people, obviously, right? But they were originally given rights to free them from an oppressive government. And so corporations changed that charter, that amendment to the Constitution, rather, in the American Constitution, in increments over several decades to give corporation human rights. And so a constitutional lawyer would go in and submit an application to change constitutional rights for corporations and give them $100,000 to the person at the front desk, basically, to put it in a back room in a box so nobody would object to it or see it, right? And then that Constitution got passed. I'm not saying it's just like that. It's obviously much more complicated than that. But anyway, to make sure there was no challenges, because there's never been challenged, these illegal amendments to the Constitution. So by 1936, Justice Hugo Black, former Supreme Court justice, at the time he was a Supreme Court justice, had wrote an eloquent dissent of how absurd it was that an amendment meant to free black people from an oppressive government was now used by corporations to oppress the sovereign people, which was you, right? So normally, like taxes, and I don't want to go down this road because I'm digressing, but so normally taxes would tax commercial machines, commercial vehicles, commercial buildings, etc., commercial properties, right? That way the government didn't get too big. But when you start taxing everybody, in other words, it worked kind of this way. Say you want to go to a beach, which is in public road, right? And so you can park anywhere you want, because that was the idea of it, right? So you would never be taxed for everything. So you can park wherever it wasn't going to be an obstruction or on other people's properties, but you can park. And if a corporation parked their vehicle there, they could be taxed or fined or whatever, right? Rather, for parking their vehicle illegally. But you couldn't be fined for parking because it wasn't illegal. And this was, and that was the system that was meant to keep the government small. And it was because you only grew as big as the corporations were, right? Instead of the population. When you start taxing the population, it was just an incredible cash cow. So they were never going to let that go. But this was all because of corporate personhood, which then trickled over into the Bill of Rights in Canada, the Magna Carta in the United Kingdom, for instance. And a lot of countries based their doctrines up on the Americans' Constitution, the Canadian Bill of Rights, and United Kingdom's Magna Cartas, right, which is, the definition of who you are in your country, which I believe typically is a Republican, where everybody has these alienable rights. You have the right to walk around, the right to be unmolested by the police, the right to your safety and security of your own means, right? You secure your property. Once you get your property, you can secure it, and you were able to protect it if you had to. And the militia, by the way, was created as a checks and balances, so that if you had a corrupt government official in those times before they became corporate personhood, the militia would remove this corrupt entity if the local police and establishment didn't. The militia's job was to go in there and remove them peacefully, if necessary, and violently if they got to. But they were to be removed to cleanse the corruption. And then they would appoint somebody in the community that had good standing in the community, and then they would tender to get someone to fill in the position that wasn't corrupt. And when they finally got someone, then the temporary authority would go back to their normal daily activities, right? And so this was a very great protection, a very important protection. And so, like, some of you should be raising your kids to be a constitutional lawyer, to go in and challenge that and beat that. Because that's one of the ways you can free up your future. Because Mark Zuckerberg can't go to jail. I know I'm digressing. I'm sorry. I apologize. I know it. I'll get back on track in a second. Just bear with me. So Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, is a corporate personhood. He's on the stock exchange. You can't put the stock shareholders in jail. But if it was, when you went back to the charter, if Mark Zuckerberg was running on a charter instead of corporate personhood, and he'd done the stuff that he was doing, you could arrest Mark Zuckerberg. You can put him in jail for the rest of his life if the crime was sufficient enough. But then you can take Facebook, or Meta, or whatever they call it today, you can liquidate it to pay restitution of outstanding debt and for reparation to the property for whatever damage they had done, right? But because now you can't do nothing with them, you give them a fine, but because of corporate personhood, they don't even pay state, federal, local taxes. That's kept in offshore accounts. And so if they finally get a fine, an antitrust or something, no one can go to jail. Nobody gets a criminal record. And again, so there's no incentive not to be evil, right? And then instead of paying state, local, federal taxes, you leave that money offshore, grow interest. And if they get a fine, they just kick back taxes they didn't pay, a chunk of it, to pay their fine. And then they get constitutional lawyers to change the law so that never happens to them again. Which couldn't happen if you went back to the original charters. Okay, I'm sorry. I digressed. I got off beaten trail. This means that the fuel rods were only recently taken out of active use in Reactor 4. Contained 540. They had 548 extra assemblies, but the Grady number, even according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission we covered last week, the same kind of story where we cover all these Freedom of Information Act file releases. The average consensus was each fuel pool, not the top of each building, but each fuel pool apparently could have contained, because they changed the definition of storage and they were able to put the fuel rods much closer together, which threatens catastrophic, and they should never be on top of a nuclear reactor. But just a gallows laugh, right? Because it's just absurd. Why would you do something like that, see? And so 3,450 assemblies, not fuel rods, but assemblies at the top of each building. Just like 6 million pounds, is it, or something like that? And so if you got two of them on the top of the building, which I'm not sure that's true or not, but that's according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Freedom of Information Act files that were released, that we covered last week, from the 4.4 million files that were released. So if you communicate after nuclear meltdown, let's call it a nuclear accident first. If you communicate after a nuclear accident, and then through the Freedom of Information Act, you have to release 4.4 million emails about that accident. What kind of accident was that you created 4.4 million emails? That had to be something special, right? That's some crazy communication. So, think about how big the cover story is when you're talking about 4.4 million emails. Not counting phone calls, not counting in the offices and everything else. And so Reactor 4 had more fuel in, not because first off, they don't take all the assemblies out of the reactor cores, because that's why they framed the story that way. So they're suggesting they took all the fuel rods, fuel assemblies. Each assembly got 100 fuel rods. Each fuel rod is 18 pounds, and it's 12 feet long. So it's a big numbers we're talking about. Like Reactor 1 and Reactor 4 are different size reactors, for instance. But Reactor 4 was a massive, at that time, the plant was one of the biggest producers on the planet, the entire plant in power, right? 6 reactors. Okay, so your number 3, let's say the number is 3,450 assemblies. And let's say the top of the building had 8 reactor cores into it. Well, when you take the fuel when you're doing maintenance, which is like 11,000 things you might do there, or 12,000 things, say, and you bring in outside crews because you don't want to radiate your own employees from the site, because that's what's going to happen, right? As soon as you open up the containment, you're releasing all this radiation directly into the environment. It's insane. The whole story is insane. They should have never lasted this long. It's just 100% corruption. The whole industry can't exist right from inception. It has to be totally corrupt. So you basically going to remove 1/3 of the reactor cores. The other 2/3 of the reactor core was in the reactor. So here's what they've done, right? They stripped it down to this stump. That should have been raised all the way to the ground. But no, they said, we're going to build this contraption on top of the stump, which doesn't physically touch it, by the way, and then we're going to pretend that we're in the building. This is what they've done, right? So on top of that, they put this contraption, they built it off-site, and who knows how many homeless they sacrificed, because we know they did. Actually, I think I got part of that equation for you right here, right? And you actually see people on the ground by the stump of reactor 4. But don't let that sway you, right? I'll explain it to you. I got it. How do we get to there? Okay, here we go. So, how do you get to there? See, let's move that into the right place, right here. Okay, so you end up, well, first off, you end up here. That's you stripped it down. It's 2013. This reactor it's the ghost of reactor 3 and the ghost of reactor 4. Everything is gone. So you strip it down even more, and look, you actually got homeless people in paper suits, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language, and you can't tell who's who. And so they built this contraption with the cranes. You won't see people up walking around on this, by the way, and it's hard to believe sometimes that there's actually people right there, because they would have probably died that week or the week after. So he built this, this is just a bunch of tubes, basically. It was built off-site. And so they even show it to you, right? Look, you see the stump of it over there with the yellow and the red. Then they built this contraption. This is it, one part here. There's the other part right there. So ultimately it looks like this, right? So even that piece there is 100 feet below the fuel pool. So now they're up where they consider level. Then they put panels on it. They've done all this with cranes. It's all built off-site. Everything's held there by gravity, by the way. It doesn't physically touch the other building. Then the American media actually goes in and pretends they're in the fuel pool. Let's play that again just for...
My understanding is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Okay. So they're not in a building that don't exist, right? So this was all about manipulating you. Because originally there is nothing left. So you can't just build a fuel pool and say if you're getting fuel out of the pool that didn't exist, build one and say there it is. So you can't do that without the Nuclear Regulatory Commissioning playing key roles. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission had to work with them hand and foot to do this. Like this is the evidence of their it's unbelievable evil. The evil is just on a whole different level. it's hardcore evil. That's the only way you can describe it. Hi, everybody. So we got a poll tonight to help articulate. I got this screwed up. Where's it to, data? Here we go. Should the United States of America have a congressional hearing into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's ruthless cover-up of the Fukushima nuclear meltdown? And I mean, this is ruthless cover-up, right? This is ruthless, where your media, and like the only way the media can do that is if all the media participated in that lie. The only way the media can get away with it is not just if the NRC orchestrated it with the International Atomic Energy Agency, no doubt, UN / IRPA, the ICRP, the list goes on and on. These all work hand in hand, synergistically enhance each other to make the lie more believable, right? Like, it's horrifying, and that administration is no longer in a position, right, in power. And there's quite a few administrations now have showed up and replaced it. But a lot of the players are still there. Another danger comes from potential releases of plutonium. Potential. So that's the reactor 3. There's nothing left. Like, they ejected the reactor core that was running because they only had like the fuel pools were rejected out into the environment. We've never even heard tell of nothing like this. See, in the history, each of these buildings are worse than all nuclear meltdowns combined many times, many orders of magnitude. It's each of the buildings, not counting the fuel pool at the top of it, just the reactor core itself, not counting the 7, 8, 9 reactor cores in the top of the buildings, but each reactor core is equal to about 1,000 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, very little uranium, plutonium. These buildings were massive, and they were stuffed with pure uranium, and plutonium. So the inventory is extraordinary. Now, Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom. There's, like, you're talking about heart problems, liver problems, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, even Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome and schizophrenia is known to permeate because of the radiation effects, right? The health effects are stunning. And so here's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Humans are continuously exposed to a significant amount of ionizing radiation from various naturally occurring. No, you're not, like, this is the soup of life we're talking about. You're talking about just a normal stardust that everything on the planet is already acclimated to through genetic pure selection. Right, so to start off, the health effects is everybody's exposed to a significant amount of ionizing radiation from various naturally occurring. Well, you're not exposed to any ionizing radiation. That's the stuff you're already made of. They're talking about potassium, magnesium, iron, carbon, cobalt, just a natural, harmless, stupid, everyday, irrelevant material. You can't make a dirty bomb out of any of the material that they're alluding to in that statement. You can't take potato chips and bananas and, like, you know, there's potassium mines. You can eat potassium all day and it still can't hurt you. So you can't make a dirty bomb. You can't blow up a truckload of bananas and contaminate a community, okay? All right. Sources of radiation exposure are not natural occurring sources of ionizing radiation. Again, look at this. Naturally occurring sources of ionizing radiation. This is not anthropogenic man-made radiation they're talking about at all. This is not. You're not worried about bananas, potato chips, are you? Or getting in a canoe or eating peanut butter, which, let me show you some of this, because I'll come back to that. And just feel if I don't show it to you, then is it Robert Gale? Yeah, Robert Gale. He's an MD, PhD. He's in Imperial College of London with Geraldine Thomas, one of the most disgusting human scumbags you ever see. Now, he does transplants. He radiates you till you got no cells alive in your body, and then he tries to grow something on you. So, lifetime cancer risk from Fukushima employees, what he's talking about right there. But it gets worse. So he's got a list. Watch this. So, comparable risk of death. Smoking 14 cigarettes, you get more radiation, he said, than you do at Fukushima Reactor 3. Eating 25 cups of peanut butter, if you work all day at Fukushima, you'll get more radiation from 25 cups of peanut butter than you would at Fukushima all day. He said you'll get more radiation spending 20 days in New York than you will working at the nuclear meltdowns at Fukushima. And this is a guy that works as a doctor in nuclear medicine. That's the biggest law in history, where he radiates you and tries to get you to accept a transplant. And if you can't do it with radiation, well, then there's no way you can do it. See, that's his world. You got to be irradiated, or it can't work. And so I got to kill 1 billion people. Then let's kill them. We'll figure this out. He's that callous about it. So driving 600 kilometers in a car is the same comparable risk, he says, at working at Fukushima. Flying 40,000 kilometers in a plane, kayaking for 15 minutes. You get more radiation than you do from a nuclear meltdown. It's almost too much to bear, isn't it? Now let's play that clip. Where's that? Yeah, let's give Robert Gale some prominence here, because he's the equivalent of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He's going to tell you the same laws. In fact, the Regulatory Commission is going to go to him to get the laws, basically. I'm going to adjust the volume on my end. I want you to hear this, though. It's incredible.
And then the final slide will just show you, where on that thermometer does something like Fukushima lie. Now, you'll hear a lot of detailed scientific discussions of our uncertainties, that we shouldn't really be talking about point estimates. We should be talking about ranges. But I think what people want to know, what the public want to know, what I have to deal with, and when I'm in Tokyo, and people ask me, or the workers ask me, what is my risk from getting 50 millisieverts? They want to know really where. I'm sorry, if you can go back. Where am I on that thermometer? They don't care if it's 2 in 10,000 or 4 in 10,000, which is a huge scientific difference. But just where am I on that calendar, on that thermometer? And I think these kinds of expressions, give a better sense to the public, and that's certainly an area where we can improve. And I guess the final slide, I'm sorry, it wasn't the final slide, is just looking at comparable risks of death is another way of trying to express these things to the public. So getting 1 millisievert of radiation, which is just on the bottom, is equivalent to just smoking just 14 cigarettes, period. Not 14 cigarettes a day, but smoking 14 cigarettes. And you can see some other amusing things, like eating 25 cups of peanut butter. Peanut butter has a risk of containing aflatoxin, which is can cause your death or can cause liver cancer. Driving 600 kilometers. So that really helps people quite a bit in understanding where they should place the risk of Fukushima. So I'll stop there and return it to you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Gale. I'm a visiting professor of hematology at the Imperial College in London. And I'm an MD PhD, and I treat people with cancer. And so my background in entering this is really fundamentally in giving, I'm involved very much in transplants, bone marrow transplants. Because you may know that we use extraordinarily high doses of radiation to prepare people for transplants, and that very much simulates the situation that could occur or did occur in Chernobyl and other radiation accidents. So my colleagues and I are the people who actually have hands-on experience treating high-dose radiation victims. And lifetime cancer risk, for example, I said that for a Japanese or American male at the age of 50, it's about 1 in 2, 50% is your lifetime cancer risk, which is somewhat discouraging. I think several people have said to me in hearing that if I have to get cancer, I hope I get a good one. I hope I get prostate cancer and not lung cancer. But you can make that worse by being a smoker, as you can see from that thermometer. But there are some other things. What do we consider negligible? Where does a CT, probably fit in?
So he gives people extraordinary high doses of radiation for a hobby. And then for kicks, he goes down to Japan and tells them it's like peanut butter and smoking cigarettes and eating, being in a kayak for 15 minutes. And like you're at a nuclear meltdown. It's just to me, like this guy's in charge of your loved ones at hospitals. And he's also probably teaching students too. And so the people working in this environment, where there's detonations gone off and there's unbelievable radiation doses there, to go down and tell the employees this kind of stuff. And then he's going to take your children, your friends, your family, you, and he's going to radiate you like a guinea pig and to try to do a transplant. It can't work in that environment. And he's going to do it for decades and decades and decades till he figures out a way to make it work. Eventually he'll concede, right, and lower the dose a little bit. He's like this monster right there, right? Man-made source, because of its relatively high energy levels, ionizing radiation is capable of producing significant biological change. Ionizing radiation gets its name from the fact it causes ionization, ejections of electrons, where it interacts with atoms and molecules that constitute cells and tissue. This create charges, often unstable, highly reactive entities. The ensuing reaction may result in permanent molecular damage. Radiation disrupts cell divisions, and one of the most sensitive tissues are those in which cells frequently divide: skin, hair, bone marrow. And think about what Robert Gale is doing. The list goes on. So when you come back to the hoodwinking, where they talk about, right, they frame the narrative so that you assume that anthropogenic man-made radiation is exactly the same as this, and that because they're claiming that you get bombarded by this all the time, and then the extra stuff is a fraction of what this is, basically. See? That's how they're doing it. They're two completely different. You can't conflate these together. You're talking about space, outer space, and minerals in your rocks, and cosmic radiation, and radon, like really radon, which pulses less than tritium. It's completely harmless. What's killing everybody, they're trying to blame it on the radon, right? A large fraction of the lung cancer, especially here in Canada, for instance, because Canada's released so much radiation through the CANDU reactors. It's devastating what they got done. You can look up that documentation where we cover all the studies and that. It's like a 3-hour presentation just on the CANDU reactors, Canadian CANDU reactors. You'll find that video. And we're only talking about tritium, and tritium's the last one you're worried about, but you bloody well better worry about it. And tritium is way worse than radon, and you can't contain the tritium in the CANDU reactors. Well, there's a lot of tritium in every nuclear power plant. You can't. it seeps right through the pores of the tanks, literally radioactive water from the neutron bombardment, I guess. So the fuel pools at the very top of the buildings. Let's get human skin. Well, actually, the hair follicles can allow radiation to seep into your body if it's wet. But like when you shower or you wash or bathe, you absorb several liters of water. And so when your water is radioactive, your skin is a perfect venue. I'll give you an example. I'm going to use hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to spray it on my jugular vein on each side. And it's really good at killing pathogens and viruses, by the way, in your blood. It's exceptionally good. And it's just dosing yourself with a whole bunch of oxygen. Oh my God, I got all this oxygen in my body. Which is great for your body. Automatically, you feel better. Alleviate headaches. It's really good for fighting viruses and flus and bad coughs, bad hacks. Generally, if you got a really bad cough, you spray it on your jugular vein, it'll be gone in seconds. It might show up 4 hours later, but do it again. And a lot of these coughs are bacteria infection, right, in your blood. So it's really good at ending that too. I'm just saying, I'm not saying don't see a doctor. I'm just saying you better start using stuff like that if you got a bad cough. I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just stating a fact. This radiation is very small range. Is blocked by human skin. But the human skin absorbs an incredible amount of rain, for instance, right away. So radon levels... Look, the reason they want you to check for radon levels in your homes are not because they don't give a fuck about you. It's because there could be a uranium deposit in your community, like they done with Sunnyside in British Columbia, where everybody was getting high radon readings. So they said, oh, well, it's too dangerous to live here. And they moved everybody out, and then they announced they had a huge uranium deposit right underneath there. The most important source of terrestrial exposure is inhalation of radon, which is produced by the radioactive decay of naturally occurring uranium. Of course, this is ridiculous to suggest that you're worried about radon. It doesn't live very far from the ground, right? It's natural. You're already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection. What you're getting sick and dying of and getting all kinds of illness and diseases is the weapon nuclear war they had for decades. They call it nuclear testing. Well, like the Soviet Union biggest bomb was equal to Bomba was equal to 3,800, but that's their admittance, so it's much worse, you can be sure. It was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. So if you had Russia and France throw 1,900 Nagasaki bombs in the same spot, is that not a nuclear war? Are you going to call that a nuclear war? If people do a nuclear testing, that's considered an assault to the environment now, right? So what the fuck was 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time with the former Soviet Union's biggest bomb? And Castle Bravo had multiple megaton bombs. These are nuclear wars. The reason they'd done it out there because they didn't want to radiate their own country, see? So again, you got to be very careful where they're trying to equate human doses with deposits of mass of tissue. So they're talking about the energy you're getting, external energy getting pulsed with. So remember we talked earlier how some gammas can emit several hundred meters pulsing of energy every second, almost at the speed of light. They actually said one doesn't go as quick as another one. Right? It's like there's evil, and then there's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They got their corner, the evil part corner when it comes to nuclear. So what I'm saying is you're not going to be around the fuel rod, so you're not worried about that external beam, like beam radiation. You're worried about radioactive fallout, physical atoms that you breathe in, that is on your food, is in your showers or in your dishes when you're washing them and stuff like that. In your hot tub, right? You know, it's 7,000 becquerels a kilogram, or 7,000 becquerels a liter. That's 7 million atoms for a hot tub, for instance. Do you want your children stewing in a hot tub with 7 million atoms of anthropogenic man-made radiation? Do you really think that your children are not going to be severely impacted down the road from that exposure? Or right away, even in some cases? Human exposure is measured not by the amount of energy that ionized radiation deposits in a unit of mass tissue. Your body attacks every atom in your body with white blood cells, non-stop. Pow, pow, bang, 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 bang. Every second, that pulses energy, and that's wrecking chromosomes and DNA and cells. Your body has to repair all of that and attack the source. So as you get thousands of these things into your body, is lit up everywhere, right? And your immune system is compromised. You start feeling lethargic. You start feeling like you're not hungry because you're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. You're not thinking rationally anymore. And so as the population experiences this in a mass, then you can expect to see more road rage, more airplane rage, stuff like that. More people acting like, what is he, drunk or something? No, it's just lack of oxygen. And then as you wipe out the phytoplankton, the base is the food chain, the base is the oxygen chain, the base is the carbon sequestering chain, which gets wiped out right away because this is at the surface of the oceans. The surface ocean is the biggest mass on the planet. Let me explain that one to you. Because the NRC obviously is not trying to educate or help anybody, not even their own loved ones. So you got to think of curium isotope as the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods first off. And it's going to be a cesium. Think of cesium as pulsing 600 feet every second. So if you got and this plume over there is a cesium plume. As France's cesium plume had 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic centimeter, I believe it is. Let me see. I think I can find that. Dear sheet blows. So that particular model was this study from France's government here. Radiation levels in the United States West Coast spiked over 1 million times normal. This is the French government, the IRSN. And this model is only based on 9 days. So the actual model is this one right here, which is based on 16 days, which is 9 days. This is the 25th of March. It's 14 days. So 14 days of radioactive fallout. And here I got the better version of it right here. So this is based on 14 days of radioactive fallout when it stops. Or this is 30 days. I'll tell you when we're at day 20. We're at day 20 of the tsunami, but 16 days, 17, 18, 19, 20 days after the last reactor exploded. This is 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. So you just can't have cesium-137, right? But that's, the industry is a very secretive, cultish type industry, very protective of their secrets, because if the population learns these little minutiae, these little details of the details, they'll start putting two and two together and start realizing they better fight for their lives. They better fight for their children's lives. And I'm not kidding you. You better get your act together. You think that this is not real. You're sorely mistaken, and you need to get educated. There's no shame in it. That's why we're here 5 days a week in order to try to get you on the right path. So this is March the 12th, which is 31 days later, because it happened on March 11th, right? So this 31 days later, the whole planet, now this never goes away. Not in your lifetime anyway. And each of these atoms, and this is an invisible snowstorm like a snowstorm. Think of each snowflake pulsing heat almost at the speed of light up to 600 feet. And by the way, when the alphas and the gammas and the betas and the neutrons, which are in that plume, are pulsing, they hit each other almost at the speed of light. They don't quite they don't mix, right? And there's what's known as a breaking effect. Bremselung or something like that, a German word. But it's a breaking effect. So instead of mingling and bypassing through each other, like a typical element, at these speeds would do, these hit each other and they change direction. And that effect is known as an X-ray. And so what we're looking at is the entire planet, which, I'm looking at the mass of land in particular right now. And, the ocean, you're taking out the phytoplankton, and they're going to get wiped out. And that's why you've seen all the whales and birds, and whales in particular, right, the phytoplankton is the coplankton. The species that are dependent upon the phytoplankton disappear or showing up emaciated like the gray whales, for instance. So you got 12,000 dead gray whales since 2016. You can't blame that on windmills, right? Even though they're trying. That ain't windmills. They're showing up emaciated at the end of their migratory run. They don't have enough energy to go back. So they work their way back a little way looking for food. And in desperation, then they'll eventually show up with 2 inches of blubber instead of 12 inches of blubber. And that's like on the last show we done was Thursday. We covered that stuff in particular. The 2014, 15, 16, 17 stories of the species. They weren't mentioning avian influenza anywhere. Their starvation, all the polar whales showing up in mass were always described as emaciated. But now we got all the species, but all the whales. So you got an unusual mortality event for the beaked whales. You got an unusual mortality event for the fin whales. You got an unusual mortality event for humpback, for gray whales, for orcas, for the blue whales, for many other species, culver-beaked whales. I think I already mentioned them. It's not just polar whales. And so, the sperm whales we covered a lot, showing up in mass. We've never seen any of this. Everything is post-Fukushima. All these weird storms, these supercell typhoons, supercell cyclones, supercell hurricanes are post-Fukushima. And now we got the Atlantic Ocean cooking out there at 80 degrees. And so when hurricane season comes along, you know what's going to happen. We're going to see these 200 mile per hour storms coming ashore in areas where they don't have building codes for 200 miles per hour because we never had that in history, only post-Fukushima. And, the random ones, but remember, the mass die-off of whales that you do talk about are coordinated closely with the nuclear weapons testing time, right? They were in those areas. They were most likely a result of it. And then the video I showed you earlier, Castle Bravo, where 5,000 square miles is a lethal dose for humans. Well, how does the animals and birds and everything in that ecosystem escape that thing? And if you actually look at the decline of the species on the planet, you got to look no further than post Manhattan Project. So Hanford right now, in just one event rather, and dumped 450 billion gallons. So, it's hard to picture it. I'll tell you a way to picture it. It's equal to a 6-foot wide aquarium of nuclear waste, where each liter of it, if you put it in the wall at a train station, would kill everybody that walked past it for 1,000,000 years. But imagine an aquarium 6 feet wide of this stuff, 518 feet tall, and wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And then punch in, the national laboratories, the Idaho National Laboratories, for instance, Chalk River National Laboratories. Once you start doing that, and then you start looking at different countries that have done the same thing, then you start seeing a horror what this nuclear industry has got done to us. And the urgency of addressing it, right, of dealing with it. You got to deal with it. History will curse us if we don't deal with it. And so the nuclear regulatory job is to make sure you don't understand that, see? So 1 million to 10 million times after increased a cesium-137, and that model is based on the 18th of March, which is 2 days after the last reactor detonated. Because the jet streams are real, so they bring it over within a couple of days. 3 days, 3.5 days, they start to show up. And they built them in an earthquake zone. They built these reactors in an earthquake zone. They get 1,000 serious earthquakes each year. And then they built it almost at the low tide line, where they have a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis and big ones. And that they're well aware that the tectonic plates themselves are right off the coastline. And that if they have an event, they have no time for people just to run to the top of the hills, let alone a nuclear power plant, to try to mitigate it, right? And they built a stupid amount in that environment where the prevailing winds are going to blow to the northern hemisphere immediately, and did. And that model is only based on a few days of emissions. Anybody really think that the emissions have stopped even today? So when you talk about absorbed doses, you're not even glossing over the internal, which is what it's all about, because it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. It starts pulsing energy and destroying cells and chromosomes and DNA nonstop. Your body has to repair everything that it destroys every second and attack the source. So as you got hundreds of thousands of these into your body because you can't avoid it, every one of them are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. Your body has to attack each one, and the damage is doing each time with white blood cells. And then you wonder why you're making irrational decisions. And now Canada removed the restrictions on all the food from the nuclear wasteland after 93 days to add horror to the horror. Well, 55 countries banned the food for a decade, from 14 prefectures, not just the Fukushima prefecture. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, by their omissions and their silence, has caused everybody on this planet to end up at death's door. Now, they kept growing the food. They never stopped growing the food. There was 55 countries banned it, and 14 of the prefectures are highlighted for you. So that's this heavy radioactive stuff we're talking about. Where do you think they shipped it all to? Canada. So Canada sees an explosion in diseases because, and everybody in Canada is sick because they've been feeding that to us nonstop when nobody else would take it. So we got the worst of the worst. And what I mean by that is the industry is insane. They're growing food right alongside the 1-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wastelands. And they're in a coma within sight. No one even lives there. They just go there and farm right alongside the 1-ton bags of radiation in the middle of a nuclear wasteland. And people wonder why I work so hard for so many years, is because it's not a difficult story to learn. And we generally keep it alive by doing a 24-hour news cycle to keep the story fresh, right? In the hopes that the world will come to its senses. What you need is somebody out there just fund me with enough money each year to challenge this industry. And don't think for a second I won't go for it. Don't think a second I can't do it either. You'll be making a serious mistake if you think I can't challenge this bunch of tools. And I'm not fucking afraid of these people either, at all. Because they are cowards. They are cowards. They're literally cowards. In fact, I've heard stories, I've had phone calls where a bunch of these people were together and a car backfired, most of them shit in their pants, basically. Like, physically, thought their time was finally up. They're tippy-toeing everywhere they go. They know that's what a scumbag does, see? Okay, so there's some shitty videos and pictures from yesterday and today for you. Let me play them for you. Bit of entertainment for the end of the night. So we raised $300 as the week closed off last week, and I'll show you what I spent it on. And that was $200 from Sue. Sue, she's in the comment a lot for the last while. And we raised $30 from Kevin G. Hi, Kevin. And we raised $50 from Stephen Young. And Stephen Young's getting new treatment now, right? He's finally got a path, hopefully, that'll change things. So we're super excited to see how that plays out over the next few months. Okay, so let's play some videos. I went and picked up more equipment for the trailer. And this will explain for you anyway. Just let the video play for a bit of entertainment. Then we'll close the poll down. We'll call her a night. Anytime you're ready, Dana. Still won't play. Okay, I think we got it now. Okay, I haven't. Sue me. It's Saturday the 24th, I guess. I'm show you this. I picked up yesterday. Some of you will make sense for it. I needed these pliers, man. They tortured me. I had to get a couple of new one of these. You know, they're not cheap. And these are for Easy Track. I bought 36 feet of Easy Track, and that's to bolt down the track. For the rings, more of them. We got shackles. 3 types of shackles. We got 4 packs of these, worth $15 each. These are the, I'll show you after. So they got that, they all got this ending on it, right? So we got 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. There should be another one there. That's all I can afford of them. And where the hell did my hose go? But I got bigger problems right now. So there's my Easy Track. I got 4 of these. And that's what all those leg bolts are for, is to bolt that down. But I broke off the chummy on the winch, the back winch. I gotta get a bigger cable the next time I can go to St. John's and pick up stuff. Because that cable's not gonna cut it. And it'll hook up that to the air hose so that cut off will reach. But I gotta get this loose, so I got a couple screwdrivers. I got a couple screwdrivers and a maul, a little small hammer. See if I can get that loose. And then I gotta clean up my driveway. And then I'm gonna try to pull that out of there, put it over by the shed and mount the crane and the Easy Tracks for a Sunday fun time. Okay, so that's the temporary fix. All the garbage I have to do. I got it. Alright. Okay, so just gonna put another pack on. That side's pretty well done. And you can clip these in anywhere you want. Just take them out. And then you got these clips, right, so you can just move them anywhere at any given time. One-handed too. That's a big deal. We got to pick up a bunch of these yet. I got 8 or something, but they're cheap, right? They're on sale. Oh, I should say they're cheap. They're on sale. And another half a dozen of them, a half a dozen of these. Put some more bolts in. Job well done. I'm gonna have to cut off the back about an extra foot, and I'll put a foot in the middle right here, and another foot right there or something. But I gotta pick up more of these. These are $50 for every 8 feet. So we got them on sale. Spent $300 altogether. There's a couple other little things I picked up too, right? But pretty good stuff, folks. And so we got everything mounted up I'm going to change a few things when the weather warms up, but that's a big deal now to get that set up, finally done. I'm super happy. Always better when something comes together, right? Okay, so let's close the poll down tonight. Should the United States of America have a congressional hearing into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's ruthless cover-up of the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns? And that's a big yes, a big positively, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. 53 votes, a big deal. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a big old thumbs up. Might go nowhere because we're censored so heavily, but hey, you never know. And so, yeah, I had to stop. Friday went in and picked up everything, and they were those big easy tracks. They were on sale, right? So you save $20 on each track. And so I was like, well, and the other pieces were on sale. I said, you know what? If I put everything back and I get that, because they won't be on sale anymore. They only had 4 in stock, right? And the trailer's 16 feet, just shy of 16 feet. And so I'm gonna take 2 feet on the. I'm gonna move everything down 2 feet, I think, in the spring or something. Cut it and then have pieces for the center rather than grab other pieces. So we'll see everybody tomorrow night. We're gonna pick up where we left off tonight because I got so much stuff gathered up on the weekend, and you just can't rush through this stuff. That's the problem. Right, such an important subject that if I try to rush through it, then what's the point of doing all that work, right? And so I don't care how long it takes me to tell the story, because there's so much to be told, right? And I get a feeling there's going to be another week of the Freedom of Information Act foils, the releases that we're going to be covering, unless there's some really breaking news. Because I can always go back and get all the news from the last week, right, with the search engine. But right now I'm focusing on the Freedom of Information Act because of the betrayal. Because I'm reading probably 10 times more than I'm showing you. And I only showed you half what I have there tonight from the weekend. But anyway, I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. All hugs for everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. We're going to be back kicking butt tomorrow night. I got most of the work already done, so it'll be a bit easier on me. I haven't stopped all weekend, so maybe I'll take it easy tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.